Welcome to the Schools of Excellence podcast, where we transform everyday leadership struggles into powerful legacies that impact generations. I'm your host, Chani Wilshansky, a 20-year veteran of school leadership who has helped hundreds of school leaders achieve what many thought was impossible through our signature programs, School Leadership HQ and Enrollment Engine. With our battle-tested frameworks and blueprints, leaders have achieved 90% parent retention, 50% less staff turnover, 15% improved profit margins, and increased enrollment by 25%. My mission is simple: to revolutionize school leadership by elevating the skills, the habits, and mindset of passionate leaders ready to create lasting change. Join me as we build your legacy of excellence, one transformative conversation at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Schools of Excellence podcast. We are kicking off just an interesting conversation because for those of you that have been following the podcast for a while, you know that I don't do a lot of interviews. I actually rarely do interviews because I'm very specific and intentional about the quality of content and just the type of conversation that I really want to have on the show. And so when I decide to bring someone on, it's really because I think they have something very unique to offer and a valuable perspective in dialogue, not so much like tips and tricks or whatever it is, but like a really good conversation that's worthy of your time to listen to. So I'm excited today to have a conversation with Evelyn Knight, and I'll really have Evelyn just introduce herself because I think we do the best job introducing ourselves sometimes. And then I'm excited to see where this conversation unfolds.
Thank you so much for having me, Connie. Again, I am Evelyn Knight. I am a two-time TEDx speaker. I've gotten to represent the beautiful world of early childhood education twice on the TEDx stage. And I am a childcare center owner myself. I'm a childcare business coach, and I'm the host of the Childcare Business Coach podcast. And I think the most important thing for me is I am an advocate for ECE. I just wholeheartedly believe in our field, and I know it has the power to change the world. So that's why I really do what I do, is to advocate for these young children.
Yeah. So I actually want to take the conversation in a little bit of a different direction before we dive into, some of the usual topics that people hear about of staff, accountability, culture. You have a unique experience with grief and walking through loss. And when I think of our industry and how there's so much outside external pressure to show up, to perform, to be a certain way, to respond a certain way, to just be okay all of the time. Walk through just very personal experience. And while I know you've shared and for your own audience, I think it's important for people to hear that grief changes our identity. It changes who we are. Would love to invite you to speak to that a little bit, wherever you feel will take you the conversation.
Okay, no problem. And I'll share my story. I've actually had a lot of grief in my life. I know when you and I first met and started collaborating, it was during the time that my husband, I think we met before my husband passed away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my husband was actually terminally ill for 10 years. And yeah, he was sick for 10 years. And in 2012, the first time it really got bad, I got a phone call from one of his friends at work, and they just said, Evelyn, Ronnie collapsed and he's being rushed to the hospital. Don't panic. Well, I was literally, I was gone. And of course I panicked, right? Who tells you not to panic? Your wife. And so that started the journey. He ended up being in the hospital for almost a full month. And it was so bad during that time that I had two separate doctors come to me and ask me if my affairs were in order. And I just remember just begging God, please, I'm not ready for this. So that started my journey on having a terminally ill husband, basically. And so he ended up, fast forward about 7 years after that, it got really, really bad. And I became his full-time nurse, and eventually we did lose him. And so, the grief journey definitely changed me. I am not the same person I was before he got sick, while he was sick, and today after losing him. We were together for 30 years. So that will absolutely change a person. And I think in the grief journey, we have a choice. And I had something very profound happen to me 2 months after he died. I just remember thinking I could quit, I could sell all my companies, and I never have to work again. and I could just kind of wallow in my grief. And this other widow reached out to me through Facebook Messenger. And she said, my heart goes out to you. And I was just telling her, like, yeah, I'm really struggling. I can't get his clothes. They're like still out where he left them and all these things. And she said, no, I totally understand. My husband's coffee cup is still sitting on the counter where he left it. And I just messaged her back and said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How long has he been gone? And she said 8 years. And when she said that to me, it just hit me so hard. And I realized I have a choice. That can be me in 8 years. And I can let this freeze my life. I can allow the grief to basically dictate who I am. Or now I can choose who I'm going to be. And if I'm going to allow this to drive me forward, or if I'm going to allow it to crush me. And I chose the person I wanted to emerge as, literally. So we all have a choice on how we're going to emerge, but I don't think we always consciously think of it. And thank God I had that experience, because it made me consciously aware of the leader I needed to be, the mother I need to be, and just who do I want to be for me?
Yeah. The intentional decision making is a big part of just who you are and who you've become and how you lead your centers, lead your business. And when someone hears just what you just shared, this small anecdote of how you made an intentional decision to choose life, to choose joy, to choose meaning. I think when we hear about it in someone else's experience, we look at them and we say, they're so strong, they're so resilient, they can endure, they're different than me, you don't know my situation. And so walk us through how just the messy journey of becoming the person who decided, I'm going to live my life with intention and not in the rearview mirror.
Well, and I'll tell you, I'm still going through it. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's been 3.5 years and I still find myself in those moments of like, who am I right now? What is going on here? But I think it's kind of funny when you said people look at you and say, you're so strong. There was a major period of time that made me so angry. And I remember talking to some of my closest friends and just saying, I don't want to be strong. I don't want to be this person. I didn't want to. I am tired of having to be strong. I had to be strong for 10 years while I was watching my husband die a very slow and painful death. And I got to the point when he did finally pass where I was like, okay, I'm done being strong. I'm done. But I still had a child, an underage child. Now he's not underage anymore. But at the time, I still had to be mom. So what really snapped me out of it was during that message string, right? I just looked and like, I can't let this be my life. And then I looked at my boys. And what really got me was, I don't think at the time I was really strong enough to do it for me. So I looked at my children and I said to myself, okay, a year from now, who do I want them to say I am? Who, when they're talking about their mom, I'm actually tearing up thinking about this. What are the things I want them to say about me? And I wrote it out, right? I literally wrote all those attributes out. And then what I did changed my life. I don't remember where it originated. This is not my original idea, but I saw it somewhere. And I wrote a letter to my future self. And I wrote a letter. I dated it for 1 year from that date. And I just said, thank you so much. And I listed and it was long. I mean, it was to the point where I would like, thank you for getting out of bed and taking a shower, because it was to that point where I couldn't even get out of bed. Right. And I just listed and I thanked myself in the future for all the things that I needed to do to be that person that my children could be proud of. And about 3 months later, I think it was, the day that would have been my husband's and my 30th anniversary came. And I was so overwhelmed with the grief that I opened the letter early. I just thought, you know what? I need to look at this letter. And what really was a huge turning point for me is I started reading that letter every day. And it just reminded me of who I need to show up to be, because honestly, I didn't have it in me. So that letter really served every day to remind me this is what I need to do. Then I would pick 3 goals that would get me there. And the other thing I did that was huge and life-changing for me. I was so focused on what I didn't have that I forgot what I did have. So I forced myself to write 5 things every day I was thankful for. And the catch was I could not repeat the same thing twice. So at first, this is really easy, right? And then you get to the point where 30 days in, you're like, what am I thankful for today? But it literally rewired my brain. I found myself waking up in the morning and I would put my feet on the ground. And my first thought was, I'm so thankful I have carpet under my feet. I'm so thankful I just got out of a bed with blankets. And I would find myself walking to the shower and thinking, I'm so thankful I have a shower with hot running water. And just doing that for a longer period of time, forcing myself, helped me to switch my perspective. And instead of looking what I lost, I started being thankful for the 30 years I had. And it was a game changer. So yeah, no, it's not easy. None of us want to be strong. Honestly, you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm
done. I want to be amongst in. I just want to like relax, just someone else hold me.
Yep. And fast forwarding into the future, I think is very powerful. That's one of the things I always project and ask myself, like, okay, a year from now, what are the results? And I have to say, part of the reason I almost teared up was last week, my youngest son sent me a text message. He's 20 years old. And he sent me a text message and he just said, Mom, I just wanted to take time to thank you. And it just listed those things. He said, you've been so inspirational. You've been so loving. And like a lot of the things that I had written to myself in that letter, he actually 3.5 years later is thanking me for. So it was like, it kind of came full circle. And it was just so powerful for me.
Let's transition. I mean, our lives really are so integrated. So it's not like work or this or that, or, we don't live in separate silos.
Absolutely.
When you look at your staff, your team, your teachers, everyone's walking through something. Everyone's holding something. Everyone's got a story. Everyone has, a part of their life that is difficult. And the emotional maturity of recognizing that at every single point in our life, there's always going to be something that is not working out for us. And it's learning how to choose happiness, even in those moments when things are not always working out for us. As a leader of your center, and as just a leader in general in your personal life, what are some of the ways that you weave this mindset of intentionality into your culture?
Well, we talk about it all the time and we train. In my programs, a lot of what I teach, we actually teach emotional maturity. It's part of my staff training. In my new hire training, we actually intentionally teach them how to be an employee, how to have emotional maturity. And ironically, I keep this giant spring. This gigantic spring on my desk. I know for people listening to the podcast, they can't see it, but it's literally a huge spring. And one of the things I explain to my staff and anyone who works with me is this is what life is like. We have our ups and we have our downs, right? And you're constantly going. The key, we're not always going to be happy, but we can always be joyful, right? So if you can find a way to stay even through the ups and the downs, you don't let the highs get you too high and the lows get you too low. That's really the key, right? And that is emotional maturity. So we actually
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because I'm actually curious. What is your definition of emotional maturity? Because I think there's so many different angles. So I'm just curious how you define it.
Well, it is. So, and by the way, my educational background is in neuropsychology. So,
okay.
So I always kind of intertwine time I'm training staff, I'm going to put a psychological piece in there. So, and emotional maturity, I think it is very misunderstood. It is extremely complex, but a lot of it is what we're teaching in ECE, right? It's the problem solving skills that a person has, their coping skills. It's their ability to empathize and see from somebody else's perspective. It's really,
if you had to pick one.
If I had to pick one, I would say,
then I'll tell you what mine is, because I'm curious to hear what yours is.
I would say it's the ability to think outside yourself.
Okay. So when people ask me my definition of emotional maturity, the response I always give them is it's the ability to hold paradoxical views and still hold respect for the other person.
Yes.
So even if the other person has a completely different viewpoint than you, very similar to what you're sharing, you can still hold respect. You can still hold opposing viewpoints.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about when you talk about training emotional maturity, right? Because a lot of emotional maturity comes through experience, it comes through discernment and wisdom and just through life experience. But I also do believe in training it. So what are one or two things in the way that you train emotional maturity?
Well, what I'm really doing is teaching my staff members to think outside themselves. And there's that amazing quote by Viktor Frankl that I'm probably going to butcher, right? That there's the moment between stimulus and a response. So the main thing I'm teaching them, honestly, if I'm going to break it down, is that I show them some of the psychological cycles that every human brain goes through. I teach them that every situation is basically neutral. We assign to the situation. And then I basically teach them that pause. I teach them how to pause. And I have a whole curriculum, an adult curriculum that I teach my staff on how to pause before the response. And I have this whole questions that they ask themselves on, this is the situation. How do you take your emotions out? How do you see it from an objective perspective? Now that it's objective, and how do you want to, what outcome do you want? So how are you going to respond? So really, I mean, if it comes down to it, I make it sound easy, but it's a lot more complex, right?
No, of course. So let's backtrack for a second. So for those of you that are listening, Evelyn's talking about Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's sold over, 30 million copies.
Amazing. Yeah.
I don't even know how many languages. I read Man's Search for Meaning once a year. It's part of just my self-curriculum.
Yeah.
And Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. And so one of the things, before I go into staff for a second, I want to just address this key point here for a second, because there's a lot of young people that are listening to this podcast. There's old people listening to this podcast. Reading history, reading people's personal biographies is such a critical part of emotional maturity.
Yes.
So whatever genre you choose, there's some amazing books written by Holocaust survivors. There's amazing books written by U.S. presidents. There's amazing books written by other world leaders. Reading their journey, their stories of how they rose to these huge positions of power, whether if you're reading about world leaders like Winston Churchill or whoever it is, pick who it is that you want to understand a little bit of their life story. And don't come into it from the perspective of this is a curriculum and what's going to be my ROI.
Yeah.
You're buying a $20 book. Relax. You don't need an ROI. You need to read the book and let the book envelop you. Come to the author. So I'm so glad you brought this up, because I have such a passion for reading. I mean, you could see all the books behind me, but I really believe in reading biographies of stories of endurance, stories of resilience, stories of people who walked through really hard things, not things like, oh my God, someone called me the wrong name or spelled my last name wrong, really hard things.
Yeah.
How they chose to move forward from there.
Right. I do too. It's one of the ways that I grow and I keep myself in perspective, because bottom line is we're all human, right? We are all human. We all have struggles, and all of us also have it in us to be that person. So I love reading biographies as well. When I was 19, I think I read Stephen King's biography, and this is what got me on the kick. His first, before he got published, his manuscripts were turned down 3,000 times before he got published. And that just became one of the biggest inspirations for my life, is this man turned in 3,000 manuscripts that were rejected. And then the first one that was actually accepted was Carrie, which very quickly became a movie, right?
Yeah.
So it really blew my mind. And I remember just being super young, thinking to myself, after the first 1,000, it would have been okay for him to quit, right? But he didn't. His mother told him it was time for him to quit, and he didn't give up. And so I wholeheartedly agree with you. I read all of these stories from people who, if you look at Thomas Edison, he created 10,000 light bulbs that didn't work before he created the one that did. And when he was interviewed and asked, what did you do with the 10,000 failures? He told the reporter, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just learned how not to do it 10,000 times. but they teach you how they think, right? And when you read all these inspirational stories, you learn how these people think, and soon your mind can start picking up on it. So I agree with you 100%. And I do the same thing. I
love it.
I take a longer period of time to read a book. I'll read the same chapter over and over
Same
to fully absorb. Yeah.
Okay, I want to go into a different territory with you here for a minute. So faith for different people means different things. Yeah. Some people have, a specific faith they subscribe to. Some people have just a connection or relationship with a divine, spiritual power, whatever it is. The relationship that we have with our spirituality and understanding that there's something higher and bigger at play here always.
Yeah.
Can you speak to, as a leader, as a mom, as someone who's walked through grief, however much you want to share, of course, how has your spiritual practice or your relationship with faith helped you walk through this?
It's everything to me. I'm a God girl. I can't deny it. It is what pushes me.
No denying it. This is
right.
This is what we do on the podcast.
It's
not everything. I'm done hiding.
Me too. I feel the same way. I mean, if you listen to my podcast, I talk about it all the time. And I know the people who disagree with me on that, that's okay. I have respect for everyone's views, but my faith is everything to me. And I really was born into faith. And I remember when I was about 9 years old, I had this epiphany that I belonged to God. And I knew I was going to live my life for what he wanted. And I've always been very just pray about everything God gets me through. Now, when my husband died, things changed a little bit. There was a moment where I was driving home. He was in the hospital and I was driving home by myself. And it was within probably a year and a half of his passing. And I have a very strong spiritual connection. And I just remember God telling me he's not going to make it. And basically preparing me. And I just got so angry. I said, God, you cannot do this to me. I have given you my entire life. I have done everything you've told me. You can't take him from me. And I just remember I was livid. And sure enough, he passed. And I was still angry. After his passing, I was really angry with God. And there came a point where I had to make amends because one thing I've learned the hard way in my life is nobody's guaranteed. The closest person in the world to you can be taken, right? But the one thing that for me, I know there's two things that I can rely on, that I will always be there for me and I have my back, and God is there for me and he has my back. And those are the only two guarantees I have. And I know that can sound sad, but when you really embrace that, it's also very powerful. And God really took me through a season that I was miserable when I was mad at him. And I was seeking so much. And now that I mended my relationship with God, I have the peace. And I think that's where true joy comes from. But when you're in that space in life where you feel so alone, and it could just be the financial situation at your center just feels so huge and overwhelming. Knowing that God's got your back, he doesn't care, right? He doesn't care if I'm a success.
He's also infinite. He can provide everything.
It means nothing to him. And honestly, I had this moment where I realized how insignificant my experience was in the grand scheme of things. And I look at the world and the millions of children that need us, I just realized, wow, my own personal experience is so insignificant. And I'm just so blessed to be chosen to be a conduit of God's work. And there was a couple of years, though, that I fought that. I was so mad. I fought it. But I don't know. It's just, I can't imagine living life without it. I can't imagine getting through without my faith. I just can't.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I think that for me, the things that I'm thinking about as I bring guests onto the show or as I continue to evolve what I want to have conversations with when it comes to being a leader in this space is it's reminding people that we all have a part of God inside of us.
Yes.
Whether you believe in God or not, or, a higher power, we have that spirituality that, the innocence of a child still exists inside of us. And for every single person, it means something else. And it should mean something else, right? For my own kids, your relationship with God means something else. But when we talk about schools and businesses and corporate offices, we really try to create this separation of these are the metrics and these are the spreadsheets. And then this is spiritual or whatever it is. How have you really merged and integrated? No, this isn't a separation. Like there is this beautiful way that everything gets weaved.
There is. And for me, everything is service. Like I live a life of service to God. My school, well, I actually, one of my schools is actually a faith-based school and the other one is not.
Okay.
But
that's so interesting.
Yeah. So I have both. I do have both. It's a nonprofit that is of service and the other one isn't. However, everything I do is of service, right? Like everything I do, my philosophies, my values, and what my school is based on are going to be my faith-based principles, right? And it is my driving force for everything. I mean, God tells us to minister to the children, right? They are so important. So that's what I do. But for me, it is definitely my guiding light. I like to always think of God as the CEO of my company. I'm his employee. So my faith drives me to where I'm going to go. And so I think also in that, it's super important for people to give themselves the time to hear. One thing that God told me a couple of years ago, when I was going through that period where I had to just forgive and let go, I just said, like, God, you just don't talk to me anymore. And he just said, well, you're never quiet. How can I talk to you if you're never quiet? So if you know and you're feeling that tug towards a spiritual connection, make sure you're giving yourself that quiet time. I know at first it's hard in our society, so hard, but it's a muscle and you can build it 1 minute at a time. And let that spiritual part of you hear. Because honestly, I think that is like the key to being successful. When you let go of ego, you let go of what you want, and you let that spiritual essence of you start speaking and leading. It's like the doors are unlocked.
So a story that just came up to me while you were saying that, Rachel Goldberg, her son Hirsch was taken hostage at the Nova Festival on October 7th, and he eventually was murdered by Hamas. So she's done many, many interviews about just what it means to lose a child and what it means to walk through grief and everything that she's walked through. And one of the things that she was saying in an interview was Hirsch grew up in America. He's an American and Israeli citizen. And she was saying how she's like, I feel like the more that I call out to God to help me walk through this, to help me feel Hirsch inside of me, the more I find healing and comfort and remembering that God really loves me. And as much as every hour of every moment, I have to feel like, how am I going to get through this next hour? How am I going to get through this next moment? I never feel like God has abandoned me. And that's just, I thought of that when you were, sharing that experience. And so for the leader that's listening to this, who maybe doesn't have a very strong spiritual practice, or maybe they don't have an emotional maturity training for their staff, or whatever any direction that we went through in this conversation, I'm curious to hear, what's your invitation to a person who's feeling lost right now, to a person who wishes that they had something that they can anchor to, different from the cold spreadsheets or what their accountant says or what their financial advisor says, or, just what everyone else is saying?
Yeah, I would say start with you. Start with you. I think a lot of times we think that in order to change our staff, we're always looking to change our staff. But change starts with you, and it's a trickle down. But if you don't even know where to start, I honestly would just call out to God. I mean, he will answer you. I love the story. I am a nerd about this stuff. I research it like crazy. Brian Head Welch is, ironically, he's the lead bassist for the band Tool. And everyone knows Tool is a heavy metal party, drugs, all the things. And he had a real estate agent that was a person of faith and just kept ministering to him. And he was talking about, he had meth in front of him. His baby daughter was in the room with him, and he's about to do meth. And he looked at his daughter and he said something just changed him. And all he said was, God, if you're real, make me not want this anymore. And he said, just like that, it changed. And you guys can look it up. It's on YouTube. Just look at Brian Head Welch's faith story. And he said it was just taken from him. And suddenly everything changed. And he left the band. And I mean, this guy is wildly successful, left the band and just changed everything. His daughter is now grown, but he ended up being this amazing dad who raised this amazing young woman. And the story is just amazing. So when you just cry out It doesn't matter what you believe, your higher power will listen.
Yeah, will listen. And I love, like, your higher power, however you define that, will listen. So, Evelyn, I could talk to you forever more about all these different concepts here. What is something I haven't asked you that you think is important for school owners and leaders to know during this time?
I think during this time, what I find is that we're at this catalyst in time. We have a generation of people like myself who are actually leading a totally different generation. And I see a lot of anger out there with the work ethic, right? That these kids have no work ethic. But honestly, like for me, there's a part of me that's really happy that things have changed, because for my own children, I don't want them to treat themselves the way I treated myself as an employee, right? So I do think it's twofold. We as leaders need to step up, have compassion. I used to be a very not compassionate leader until I actually have narcolepsy. And when I first got diagnosed with narcolepsy, my doctor handed me a prescription for a nap. And I'll never forget the day he handed me that prescription. I told him I would fire somebody if they told me they had to take naps at work. So God has led me through these experiences to give me more love and compassion for people. So I would really just challenge you leaders out there who are looking at your staff and this current generation, and come to them from a place of love and compassion. And for the current generation, really work on your emotional maturity, because there's a level, and we're at this pendulum, right? And the leaders seem to be over here, the staff seems to be over here, but honestly, neither one is right or wrong. We just have to meet in the middle.
Yeah. Evelyn, where can people go to learn more about you, see your work, see what you do in the world?
You can find all of my stuff at childcarebusinessprofessionals.com. And I'm on all social medias under Evelyn Knight Official. So, or there's a famous opera singer that's named Evelyn Knight from like the 1930s. So if you look up Evelyn Knight Childcare or Evelyn Knight Official, otherwise you're going to get an opera singer.
I love it. Thanks for that caveat.